Rain started before dawn and never fully stopped. Not dramatic rain. The kind that settled over the town quietly and made everything feel temporarily unfinished. Parking lots reflected pale streetlights. School windows looked dim even during daylight. People entered buildings with damp shoulders and lowered heads. Naomi liked weather that discouraged conversation. By third period, most students were complaining about the cold. Naomi sat near the back of government class, staring at the sealed manila envelope inside her backpack instead of the board. She had not opened it. Twice last night she almost had. Twice she'd stopped. The problem with unanswered questions wasn't uncertainty. It was possibility. Once opened, things became specific. Specific things changed people. Her teacher's voice blurred somewhere ahead of her. Historical records matter because societies rely on documentation. A few students groaned. Someone asked if this would be on the test. Naomi looked toward the classroom windows where rain threaded slowly down the glass. Documentation. Records. Proof. The same words kept circling her life now, as if everyone else had been discussing something for years while she stood outside the room. Her phone vibrated once against the desk. Unknown number. No message. Just missed call. Naomi stared at it, then slipped the phone face down without listening to the voicemail. At lunch, Jordan found her in the library annex basement. Not difficult anymore. He was beginning to understand where Naomi disappeared when the world became too loud. She sat cross-legged on the floor beside a cart of discarded books, repairing torn pages with thin strips of archival tape. The basement lights hummed softly overhead. "You know most people use lunch periods for social decline," Jordan said quietly. Naomi didn't look up. "Most people seem tired." "That's because they're 17. That's not a medical condition." "It absolutely is." He leaned against the shelving unit nearby. Not too close. Naomi noticed he'd started doing that intentionally. Strategic distance. The fact that she noticed unsettled her more than it should have. "You skipped cafeteria interrogation today?" she asked. "I was banned." "By who?" "My own personality." That earned the smallest exhale through her nose. Almost laughter. Jordan watched carefully without making it obvious. Outside the basement door, carts rolled faintly across the library floor above them. Muted movement overhead. Safe distance from the rest of the school. Jordan glanced toward the envelope partially visible inside Naomi's backpack. "You opened it yet?" Naomi's fingers stopped moving against the book spine. "You saw that. You carry tension differently now." She looked up finally. "What does that mean?" "You keep checking your bag like it owes you money." Despite herself, Naomi looked down toward the backpack immediately. Jordan smiled faintly. "See." She hated that he was right. Not because he noticed. Because she had stopped noticing herself. "It's probably nothing," she said quietly. "But you don't believe that." "No." Jordan nodded once. Rain tapped softly against the tiny basement window near the ceiling. Naomi returned to repairing the book. "What if it changes something?" she asked after a while. Jordan answered carefully. "It probably already has." She looked toward him again. Not defensive this time. Tired. "You always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like you swallowed a documentary." He laughed softly. The sound lingered strangely in the quiet room. Naomi realized suddenly she had begun associating Jordan with relief. That recognition frightened her enough that she stood immediately. "I should get upstairs." Jordan straightened slightly. "Naomi." But she was already gathering the repaired books. Not fleeing. Just retreating before something became emotionally visible. He let her go. Barely. At County Memorial Hospital, Elena sat motionless in her car long after her shift ended. Rain slid down the windshield in slow, uneven lines. Inside, the hospital entrance automatic doors kept opening and closing behind people carrying tired expressions and paper cups. Elena watched them without seeing them clearly. Her phone rested face down in the passenger seat. 3 missed calls from Naomi's school district office. Probably graduation paperwork. Probably harmless. Still, her chest tightened every time the screen lit up. A knock startled her. Sandra Wilkes stood outside the driver's window holding an umbrella. Elena lowered the window halfway. "You're still here." Sandra smiled apologetically. "I could ask you the same thing." Elena attempted a small smile back. It failed halfway. Sandra noticed. Of course she noticed. Hospital people noticed exhaustion instinctively. "You okay?" Sandra asked gently. The question landed differently now. Lately every version of concern sounded dangerous to Elena. "Just tired." Sandra nodded slowly. Rain drummed against the umbrella overhead. "I hope I didn't upset you at the store," Sandra said after a moment. "You didn't. You got quiet." Elena looked toward the steering wheel. "She's sensitive about photographs." Sandra hesitated. Then carefully, "Wasn't it more you who was sensitive?" The sentence entered softly. No accusation. Worse because of that. Elena's fingers tightened around the wheel. Sandra immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "That came out wrong." But Elena barely heard her. Because suddenly, a memory. Hospital corridor lighting. Naomi at 6 years old turning her face into Elena's coat while someone lifted a disposable camera. "Please," Elena hearing herself say sharply. "No pictures." Sandra's voice pulled her back. "Elena!" She blinked hard. It was a difficult time. Sandra's expression softened. "I know." "No, you don't," Elena thought immediately. But she only nodded once. Sandra adjusted her umbrella against the rain. "You know people remember less than we think they do." Elena looked at her then. Really looked. And understood something quietly terrifying. Sandra was trying to comfort her. Meaning Sandra believed there was something to comfort. That evening David found Naomi sitting in the garage with the car door open but the engine off. Rain noise filled the silence around her. The overhead bulb cast weak yellow light against the concrete floor. She looked up when he entered. "Your mom says you've barely eaten today." Naomi shrugged. David leaned against the workbench nearby. He smelled faintly like motor oil and wet denim. "Can I sit? You live here." Still polite to ask. He lowered himself carefully onto the folding chair beside her. For a while they listened to rain hitting the driveway. "You and your mom fought?" "No." That sounded unconvincing. "We don't really fight." David nodded slowly. "That's true." Naomi glanced toward him. Something in his tone lingered strangely. "You say that like it's bad." David rubbed his palms together against the cold. "I think some families get so good at avoiding damage they stop saying honest things." Naomi looked down. The sentence landed too accurately. David noticed immediately and regretted it. "That wasn't aimed at you." "But it was about us." He didn't answer. Which answered enough. Naomi folded her arms tighter. "When did Mom start acting weird about pictures?" David exhaled slowly through his nose. Rainwater dripped steadily outside the open garage. "You remember that old apartment you guys had before me?" "Barely." "She got protective after that." "Protective from what?" David's jaw tightened slightly. "Not anger. Carefulness. She thought people judged her." "Did they?" Another silence. "And sometimes." Naomi watched him carefully. "What happened there?" David looked toward the rain instead of her. "You should ask your mother." Naomi's expression hardened faintly. That's everybody's favorite sentence lately. David absorbed that quietly. Then, after a long pause, "She was scared all the time back then." Naomi frowned slightly. "Of what?" David answered so softly she almost missed it. "Losing you." The words settled heavily between them. Not dramatic, just deeply still. Naomi stared ahead at the rain-dark driveway. Something inside her shifted slightly. Not understanding. Context. And somehow that felt worse. Friday afternoon, the school newspaper room smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. Jordan sat alone at the editing computer, scrolling through archived yearbook records while rain rattled against the windows. The database lagged constantly. Old files loaded in fragments. Missing uploads. Corrupted scans. Broken student records. Still, something about Naomi's file bothered him. Not because it was empty, because it felt intentionally incomplete. Mrs. Alden entered carrying a stack of essays. "You're still here." Jordan minimized the screen too quickly, which immediately irritated her. "Jordan, I'm working. You're investigating." He leaned back in the chair. "There's a difference." "No, there really isn't." She set the essays down harder than intended. The room fell quiet except for rain. Jordan studied her carefully. "You know something." Mrs. Alden removed her glasses slowly. "I know boundaries. That's not the same thing." "You think curiosity makes you compassionate," she said quietly. "Sometimes it just makes you invasive." The sentence hit harder than he expected, because part of him recognized truth in it. Jordan looked toward the dark computer screen. "I'm not trying to hurt her." Mrs. Alden's expression softened slightly. "I know. Then why does everybody act like asking questions is dangerous?" Mrs. Alden hesitated, not because she was hiding information, because she was choosing words carefully. Some people survive difficult things by controlling how visible they are afterward. Jordan thought about Naomi turning away from cameras. The shredded napkin, the untouched coffee, the way she always positioned herself near exits. "Did something happen to her?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Alden looked out toward the rain-streaked windows, then back at him. "Something happened to somebody," she answered, and left before he could ask more. Jordan remained motionless in the dim newsroom long after she was gone. That night Naomi finally opened the envelope. Her bedroom lamp cast soft amber light across the carpet. The house downstairs murmured quietly with television noise and distant plumbing. She sat cross-legged again. Same position as before. Different person inside it now. Carefully she slid one finger beneath the seal. Inside, medical forms, insurance copies, old-school registration paperwork. Nothing dramatic, which somehow made it more unsettling. Normal documents carrying strange weight. And one folded page near the bottom. County Memorial Pediatric Intake. Naomi stared immediately at the date. She would have been 6. Patient name: Naomi Bell. Below that, previous legal name. The rest obscured beneath dark ink. Blacked out deliberately. Naomi stopped breathing for a second. Not panic. Recognition. Like discovering a hallway in your house you somehow never noticed before. She read further. Emergency contact. Elena Marquez. Not Bell. Marquez. Her mother's maiden name. At the bottom corner someone had handwritten, "Photo documentation declined by guardian." Naomi's fingers trembled once. Only once. Then she folded the paper carefully back into place. Across the room her mirror reflected only darkness because she had angled it away years ago. Suddenly another memory surfaced. Not complete. Fragmented. A hospital waiting room television. The smell of antiseptic. Someone saying, "She needs records." And Elena answering sharply, "No pictures." Naomi pressed both hands against her forehead. Not crying. Trying to hold thoughts still long enough to examine them. A knock sounded softly downstairs. Voices followed, muted through the floorboards. David answering the door. Then Elena. "What are you doing here?" Naomi froze. Not from fear. From the tone. She moved quietly toward the staircase. Halfway down she stopped where shadows concealed her from the front hallway below. Sandra Wilkes stood near the doorway, dripping rainwater onto the mat. Her umbrella folded awkwardly at her side. Elena looked pale. David looked confused. Sandra spoke carefully. "I found something at home and thought maybe you'd want it before I throw old boxes out." She held up a small photo envelope. Elena's face changed immediately. Not visibly enough for strangers. Enough for Naomi. David noticed too. Sandra continued softly. It's probably nothing important. Nobody moved. The silence stretched too long. Finally Elena stepped forward and took the envelope. Her hands were shaking slightly. Sandra's expression shifted. Concern now. Real concern. I didn't realize this was still sensitive, she said quietly. Elena forced a tight smile. It's fine. But Naomi heard it immediately. The lie. Sandra looked like she wanted to say something else. Didn't. Instead she nodded once and left back into the rain. David closed the door slowly. Then turned toward Elena. What was that? Elena stared at the envelope, not answering. Upstairs, Naomi stepped backward silently before either of them could look up. Back into darkness. Back into uncertainty. But now something had changed beneath the fear. For the first time in years, Naomi no longer fully trusted her mother's version of the past. And downstairs, Elena stood alone in the hallway holding an envelope she looked afraid to open. As though paper itself had become dangerous.